Next is The Kingdom of Dreams and Madness, directed by Mami Tsunoda, a film that follows filmmakers Hayao Miyazaki, Isao Takahata, and Toshio Suzuki as they prepare to release 2 films for the Japanese animation company Studio Ghibli. And if you don't know who that studio is, then I thoroughly recommend you do yourself a favor and look them up, because they have released some amazing films like My Neighbor Totoro, Spirited Away, and Grave of the Fireflies, to mention a few. While I'd say this film really only lends itself to fans of Studio Ghibli, it's still an entertaining watch not only because of the personalities, but also because of the behind the scenes footage that shows just how much amazing talent goes into making their films. As far as I'm aware, most of the studio's animation comes from painstakingly drawing thousands of storyboards in a very traditional form of animation compared to someone like Disney, who now incorporate digital animation in their films. I recommend this film for anyone that loves Studio Ghibli or is just interested in seeing how great artists work.
もう一回やるんですよ、落ちてもできるまで。
そうなんです。大事なことなんです。
はい、ありがとうございます。
おい、なんて平和な顔してんだろう。お前スケジュールないな。なあ、俺、お前代わりに行け。
Next is Pumping Iron, directed by George Butler and Robert Fjord. But let me preface this recommendation that I'm only suggesting watching the scenes with either Arnold Schwarzenegger or Lou Ferrigno, because the rest of the film can get quite repetitive. Essentially, it follows the world of competitive bodybuilding and the lead up to the 1975 Mr. Universe and Olympia contest, which had 2 head rivals in Schwarzenegger and Ferrigno. Almost 90% of this movie is shots of people lifting weights with voices from interviews overlaid on top, which is why I suggest skipping any part that doesn't include Schwarzenegger or Ferrigno, because everyone else has more or less the same idea to say. I personally find Schwarzenegger and Ferrigno the most entertaining just because of how inadvertently funny they can be. Still, if you like going to the gym or want to see some impressive muscles, then this is the film for you.
It's as satisfying to me as coming is, you know, as having sex with a woman and coming. So can you believe how much I am in heaven? I'm like getting the feeling of coming in the gym, I'm getting the feeling of coming at home, I'm getting the feeling of coming backstage when I pump up, when I pose out in front of 5,000 people, I get the same feeling. So I'm coming day and night. I mean, it's terrific, right? So, you know, I'm in heaven.
Next is Fire, The Greatest Party That Never Happened, directed by Chris Smith. A film that also takes a look at the making of something that failed to come to fruition, in part because of how grand its vision was. The failed event in question was the infamous Fire Festival of 2017, which looked to take the crown as one of the biggest and most exclusive music festivals in history. This is the same director as American Movie and Collapse, who so far continues to make interesting documentaries on a wide variety of subjects. While I don't think Fire is as great as those 2 films, it's still a good film and actually seems more extensive in terms of the number of interviews and footage that he uses. I do wish more of the behind the scenes footage was shown in its original form instead of being narrated over, but overall the film does a good job at giving you context and revealing how things played out, especially for someone who had no clue about this event in the first place.
We should go tell all the girls they need to post one picture of them on the beach today or on jet skis, hashtag Fire Festival before 5 o'clock.
Cause y'all like hashtag some Fire Festival shit.
They need to be fucking tagging us. Why aren't these people tagging us? This is bullshit.
Next is Exit Through the Gift Shop, directed by the infamous street artist Banksy. While initially you might think this film is about Banksy and his amazing works, this film is actually more about the story of Thierry Guetta and his relationship to Banksy, as well as other street artists and the profession itself. This film is carried by the personality of Guetta, who is one of the more eccentric characters on this list, as he spends almost every waking moment filming what's happening in his life, which makes for some very funny interactions. But as the film unfolds, there's also great commentary on the value people place on street art and questions what distinguishes it as art in the first place compared to something that someone may have just pulled off the street.
Even people who tell me no, I don't want to be filmed, I find a way of making the no as a yes.
Oh, cool. I love the design of it. So you draw. You know how to draw?
It's a painting.
Yeah.
Next is Three Identical Strangers, directed by Tim Wardle. I feel like I've mentioned this a few times already on this list, but this film genuinely has one of the most unbelievable truth is stranger than fiction stories that I've ever seen. I'm not going to say what it's all about, but I will suggest you go into this blind, because what gets revealed is kind of flabbergasting and definitely a surprise you don't want ruined. What I will add is that there are parts of this film that I wished were explored further, simply because those parts feel unresolved, and I'm not sure why the filmmakers didn't touch on them more so, aside from guessing that they couldn't find any answers for it. Regardless, this is one film that you'll be looking up and reading about afterwards, because what happens is pretty amazing.
And they said, yes, we did.
Why? How could you not tell us? What did you do? Why? And how could you?
Next is Grizzly Man, directed by Werner Herzog. A fascinating look at a man who spent 13 summers living with wild bears on the Alaskan Peninsula, 5 of which was documented by him with over 100 hours of footage. The videos that he managed to capture are not only incredible, but they also give a great insight into the man himself and his love for bears, which sometimes bordered between passionate and insane. I also really like the presentation with the interviews, which isn't just a typical sit down and talk to the camera style of interview, but rather has the subjects look directly at the camera that's on a handheld and moves with them as they're telling their story. It makes you feel like you're talking to them, and even if it might feel uncomfortable, at least it's different to what other documentaries usually do.
Now the scene seems to be over, but as a filmmaker sometimes things fall into your lap, which you couldn't expect, never even dream of.
Hi, Spirit.
There is something like an inexplicable magic of cinema.
Hi, Spirit. Well, I'm here with Mr. Chocolate and Spirit the fox, and here come some of her pups. Yay! Come some of her pups. Hi. Hi.
Next is Waltz with Bashir, written and directed by Ari Folman. This is another documentary with an amazing presentation and probably the most unique I've seen because this entire film is actually animated, and that's incredibly rare for a documentary. It follows the director's struggles in trying to remember his experiences as a soldier in the 1982 Lebanon War. What I loved most is the animation isn't just there because it looks cool, although its style is also unique and great, but it's actually there with a purpose in order to illustrate the stories and memories brought up by the people he interviews to help him remember instead of just showing them talking about what happened. This is an incredibly well-made documentary and a thoroughly engrossing form of storytelling.
אני רואה מרצדס כחולה ישנה, יורדת ככה ברחוב, וכולם משחררים עליה בשיגעון, אתה מבין? שנתיים של אימונים, והפחד הבלתי נשלט הזה.
Next is Finding Vivian Ma, directed by John Mulliff and Charlie Siskel. The film acts as a somewhat mystery thriller as it follows the director's attempts to track down a French-American nanny and housekeeper after discovering storage boxes with over 10,000 photographs taken by her, most of which look incredible and were worthy of being in galleries, but for some reason they never were released to the public, and the film tries to discover why. An interesting documentary that almost feels like it happened by sheer luck, which is kinda amazing.
So we cut it and we opened it, and it was filled to the top with rolls of undeveloped film. I took one canister and I shook it and it rattled. So I opened it and there was teeth inside.
Real talk, like, we're spending a lot of fucking money. If we want to go fucking see the pigs, we go see the pigs.
And find a way to make it work.
That's it. If we want to go fucking see the pigs and the girls want to go see the pigs, we go fucking see the pigs.